Hope you all can hear me.
Yeah.
Yes. First thing I did was put a little quiz up there.
Uh-oh.
Who knows what it is?
Martha does.
Martha, you should know. I know what you do.
You spelled curtain wrong.
I spell checked it, I swear. Yeah. Actually, it's a quiz. You guys passed. I did spell check it in Microsoft, but it appears there must be another way to spell curtain. There's an A.
I thought it was a play on words.
Somebody asked me, who's curtain? Who's she going to talk about? What's behind
What's that last name?
Yeah. That's a little levity in the day, right? Yeah. So first of all, thanks for having me. Feel free to eat your lunch and such. And I'm going to break probably all protocol related to public speaking and say, feel free to stop and ask me questions as you go. I heard it was open and a welcome environment, so to me that means ask questions as you go, and I'll be happy to, answer them and make stuff up and all of that good stuff as well. I have a friend who's been a participant within Toastmasters for several years, and he's often tried to get me to join, and I've said no. I don't like public speaking. And so he comes to events where I actually have to speak, and he's just very nice at the end. He says, great job, and everything. I always know I can count on him. So it is a little daunting in here, with a recording on me, no less. And I've also had people tell me, they're going to count how frequently you say, and so, andLl tell you, I probably won't say either of those, but you're going to count words I will use repetitively. Excited is a big one. I'm excited to be here. This is so exciting. We're excited. So just get your pencils out now, get the paper, and we'll start. But behind the curtain is really kind of talking to you a little bit about how I go about getting prepared to present. So they said talk about presentation, your presentation skills, how important it is to you in your career, and so on. So I thought, what better to let you know a little bit about how I do it. I'm not a professional at it. All I can do is say, don't copy me. Just maybe see if you pick up one thing, go for it. But other than that, just, I hope you enjoy the topic a little bit. I'll try and interweave a little bit of what my responsibilities are, so you'll get to know a little bit about me. But one of the things, I think I use this like this. Which way did this work?
That might be just for the projector.
Oh, okay. Good thing I didn't turn it off, right? So there you go. So the first thing I'd say is important that I always do is try and know my audience, because I want to make sure I'm hitting my mark with my audience. And it's really important to know if, in fact, you're going to be in front of a big group or a small group, the type of individuals, and so on. Because if not, your information, as relevant it might be, may miss the mark. So the first thing I try and do is know the audience. And I would say who I speak to a great deal is the sales team. This looks like a sales team, doesn't it? The good news is it's not our sales. You should feel good about that.
Yeah.
The one thing that's important there with them is that I need to make sure we have such a broad selling organization servicing such different markets. I have to make sure that the topics that I cover are relevant to each, and that can get challenging to try and make sure that you're touching on all the important things, that somebody has a takeaway. And the big thing for me within the selling organization is making sure you give something that they can put into their bag. You want to make sure they have tools that they can put into their bag of tricks and take out to their customers later. So that's a big thing that I'll think about when I go in front of the selling organization. The other thing is that they all need me, number one. And that helps a lot, because I do pay their commission at some point, so they're all pretty happy about seeing me up on stage. But I'm actually joking. You want it to be fun and a little inviting for them to come up later and hopefully have, one or two things they take away, each person, that they can then take in to see their customers. But you can also have another very diverse set of constituents when you're talking to executives. And this for me is probably the hardest one, because how frequently do you talk to people and they're listening and they're listening intently, but listening can look like this. And you think, oh my God, something's wrong. I'm not hitting the mark. when actually they're just listening. So you have to go in and know, hey, when people are just looking at you, it's because they're listening. It's not because you've got something in your tooth or you said something funny or off the mark. But many times in this type of situation, I'm trying to persuade the executives to invest in something, sometimes tens of millions of dollar investments, or defend a position. And so that takes a different skill set that you have to use and a very different type of a presentation. I met with Alon years ago, actually, when he was our COO, and I was talking to him about interfacing with executives. And even a small group can be a presentation, even if it's not a big crowd like this or a larger crowd. It can just be a group of a few individuals. And his recommendation was that you find the person that you want to speak to in that audience, and that's who you target everything at. But you know you're going to have other constituents in the room, and so you have to make sure you satisfy their needs as well. And so if you know that you're going to have, in this example, if you're going to satisfy a line, which I try and do regularly, if you're going to satisfy a line, but you know Bill Humes, our CFO, is going to be in the room, and he's going to want to see the analytical detail, then you don't necessarily need to go into all the analytical detail, because that's not what Alon's looking for. But you're going to want to have backup material that you can slip across the desk to have him look through and satisfy his needs in the presentation as well. And I found that to be very effective in dealing with them. It keeps them occupied, if nothing else. But more importantly, it satisfies what they're trying to fulfill when you're presenting to them. So knowing your audience before you even start is probably the first and most important thing. Then I go and I look into, all right, so once I know that, hopefully I know my subject matter. But how many of you have ever given a presentation that somebody else actually drafted? Not easy, is it? Because it's not how you would write it, it's not how you would say it, or you don't know what they meant by that. And so that's not always easy. For me, that's particularly hard because I have an organization that you heard is a bit broad. So I have an organization that's made up of 9 functional areas, 800 people between North America and Manila, and they all do very diverse things. Typically, when I present, I have to get up and give a recount of either some of the great things we're doing and or where we're going. And I need to do it on these 9 functional areas, usually in 20 minutes. And they're all doing such great things. The last thing you want to do, I really take this very personal, is I want to make sure I'm satisfying them as well, because they're usually in the audience. My leaders of this group are usually in the audience. And I want them to feel proud that they were well represented and make sure I'm conveying a message on a group that services the entire organization and has individuals who are everything from PhDs through to transactional representatives in licensing. So very broad span. So you can see, to tell you a little bit about the areas of partner shared services that you may not be familiar with, the whole center there is really the call centers, if you think about it. You have customer service, which in this vernacular means really returns. So think of it as I bought too much product, I need to return it, or I had a price error and I need to get a claim. So it's all about returning product and claims. Then you have licensing. That's a $4 billion business for us that we transact in Buffalo and Manila. So software licensing, we have the greatest market share of anyone within the industry, and that group is about just under 400 strong between the U.S. and Manila. So large organization. Then you have tech support, which is all pre-sales support. This is where our customers call in as they're getting ready to quote their opportunities with their resellers. They will call in to get this, to really understand what's the solution, what's the best thing they should buy. So very different sets of individuals, albeit they're all on the phone. But you have everything from order management all the way through to technical people who require a very different level of interaction and skill set. Then when you go to the left and right, it really starts to become different. So you have up in the upper left business enablement and optimization. could we come up with more than a mouthful of businesses?
Who is that?
We call it BE&O, and think, that wasn't supposed to be that funny, but I'll have to remember that.
Bed and breakfast.
You got the BO part.
Yeah.
That is made up of how we manage our resources in the way of people, process, and tools. So where we have our people deployed, how many salespeople do I need in this one functional area versus that? What processes are we deploying? How can we standardize them and streamline them? And what tools are we using? What should be on their desktop? You know, how should they be interacting with the system? What will make them more effective? So that's that group. Then we have our Business Intelligence Center, which is made up of our BI team, which is really all about looking forward. As you know, yay, we have a representative here. And the BI team is really looking at where we have opportunity, doing propensity studies, doing white space studies, working with our vendors to drive demand. But they also do, you're all familiar with the customer survey we do every year. You've probably heard about it. We call it ACEs. That's done out of the BI team. And so they have the ability to not only deploy the survey and implement it, but then take in all the feedback and analyze it, and then we push it back to the organization for improvement so that we're constantly improving our customer experience. Then we have our strategic development and execution. We're into big names here. This is the group who's always looking at our opportunities related to where we're going in the future. What's our direction? If we're in a certain business and market, what's our next opportunity? So this is where we would look at mergers or acquisitions. We did one recently. You might have seen it. It was called Rollouts. Very small. It was a group of professional service agents of whom we're deploying to help augment our customers' professional service staff. So they actually go out and do installations at the end user level on behalf of our resellers. Big opportunity for us. This team was responsible for that acquisition. And then on the far right, we have representatives from our compensation team. This is the team that salespeople like the most, or sometimes hate. Depends on how the salespeople do. And this is, they manage our commission and do all of the design of our commission packages and implementation, as well as incentives, as in spiffs and contests and so on. So this group is really important because we always need to make sure that we're on the forefront of what's motivating our selling organization in working with our resellers. Our business solutions team, which Amy and Martha participate in, is our team of project managers and also a group, Amy and Martha, who write RFPs and respond to our customers' opportunities that they bring to us. So this group will work on strategic initiatives that we have, such as integrating acquisitions like we just talked about, or actually deploying some of our key tools. So we're all getting new phones. Do you guys know that, by the way? You're all getting a new phone. You may not know that. It won't happen until next year, but we're finally getting rid of our 20-plus-year-old phones that we've had, and we're joining this century and getting VoIP phones. And so that's one of the large initiatives that's underway with this team as well, helping to project manage. And they do a number of different projects that we manage that are all various strategic initiatives that the region has to help move this forward. I said, anybody catch that? Mm-hmm. That was intentional.
Make sure.
North America and IS, I actually don't have that anymore. I work very closely with them. Rocky Scott is our North America IS Vice President. And prior to Rocky joining and being given that responsibility, it did work for me. And my boss has kind of said, you still need to sit tight with Rocky. So I leave this up here because I spend still quite a bit of time with IS. And we help to be that translation between what we all need as business users and getting that communicated to the IS organization in a manner that we get back the output that we're looking for to continue to move the business forward. So that's what our North America IS organization does as it relates to me and my engagement with them. So you can see when I go to stand up and present, it's different. And now I'm trying to make it all work together and weave. But the answer is it really does work together, because the way we're structured as an organization is in divisions that are vertical. And these teams all lay horizontally across them all. So we serve every one of the divisions going horizontal across them, and we leverage scale and standardization so that these functions don't have to be rebuilt in every one of the divisions, which is very effective as it relates to an organization of our size. So when I go to present, I have to find a way to take all this information, make everybody feel good who's the leader sitting in the room, and convey bits in 20 minutes when every single one of them is doing great work individually. But you can, and I'll show you a little bit about how we make that happen. So when you think about it, the next thing I have to think about is, once I know who my audience is, and once I know what I'm going to be talking about, I have to think about the image I'm going to leave. Because the worst thing for me is when somebody puts up a slide and it's just bullets on a page and they just go through it and read it one at a time. It's just not very appealing. So you want it to be appealing, but you don't want it to be too overwhelming either, with too many visuals and things flying in. Amy heard me say, as I was getting ready for this, the word flying in. And she's like, no! I'm like, all right, I'm not using anything flying in. So we had at one point in time this philosophy as a company of little is better. So true story, I was lucky enough, we have somebody on staff who actually will do the creative behind presentations. So I took my slides and I wrote all the words of the message I was trying to convey, and I sent it over. And this is what I got back. And I'm thinking, I'm not certain how to make that work in with it. And you're going to see I use some slides that's just a picture and that's it. But this is a sprout. And I was thinking, I'm not sure how to do that. So I think sometimes people can get carried away. I do get the concept of little is better. You don't want too many words. You want your voice to help convey the message and not have people have to read the screen, right, to be able to understand what you're trying to convey. But this is a new extreme for me a little bit. I wasn't too into sprouts. At the same time, this is a little too much. My admin said to me, Sandy, it's a little blurry. And I'm like, better yet, right? But how many people know people that are really detailed oriented? And to them, and by the way, I am too, but to them, it's really hard to get the message down into something small because they think they need it all, right? And this is the person of whom's going to tell you how the clock is made and not what time it is, when you really want to know what time it is. So there's the sparse side of the sprout, and then there's a little too much. I try, not always successfully, but I try to go somewhere in the middle. So I pulled this from one of my presentations in the past, and this was to help represent our business enablement and optimization team and some of the things they're doing. And I just took 3 or 4 key messages, wrote them up here so that people could read them while I spoke, and then I just spoke to it. I didn't want it so busy that they couldn't be read. They can read it while I'm talking and they're listening to me, hopefully. And it was not so much that I felt overwhelmed as the presenter. It does make it work for me to have to remember it, but hopefully I'm going to remember it anyways. So that's a little bit about then what I do there. And then I think about, well, who do I want to model? I've already said I'm not a professional speaker. And so I look to people of whom I can emulate a bit. So when I think about it, I think, now, who do I want to model going into this presentation based upon my audience, my content, and my slides that I have? Probably not the best. It's okay to be funny, but you don't need to be Pee Wee Herman at the same time. I don't like to actually have professional speakers. I like to emulate people I know. So this is Kirk Robinson, and I'll tell you the story behind the beach scene in a minute. But how many of you came to hear Kirk speak the last time. He's fabulous, isn't he? He's a great speaker. Here, what I was doing was I was going to be presenting and I was going to be showing our new BI app. And Kirk was on vacation and I needed pictures to kind of show excitement about the BI app. So I emailed him, and he was in another country actually, and I asked him if he would take his picture and send it to me with the app. I didn't know I was going to kind of get this, and I don't think he really knew what I was going to do with it. But this was like in front of hundreds of people. But Kirk's a good sport. But why I like Kirk is he tells a story. His isn't really presenting something where it's very fixed and cut, concrete. It's a story and it flows. And he's very easygoing in the way he comes across. And he's very passionate about it. And through that passion, I think people can start to visualize what he's talking about. I don't know what he spoke to here. I don't know if it was about speaking. Does anybody remember? Was it about speaking?
Yeah.
Or It was. He tells a story about his brother and what is
Yeah,
oh
mention that.
my gosh, is that a great
Yeah,
story?
yeah.
I love watching him speak. But what I do, and this is where I feel lucky, kind of, is that typically when I speak, because of the role I play in the organization, most of the GMs who have responsibility for our selling areas go first. So I actually get to sit and watch and start to see what I like and what I don't like. And then I just kind of start to emulate that a little bit and what I take. And Kirk's somebody that I actually spend a lot of time watching, because if you can just pick up one or two things from him, you know, you can really improve. And the other thing that he does so well is Kirk is a very attentive audience participant. And he sits and he nods and he smiles at you. So back to that whole glaze thing, you know, when people are intently listening, he has picked up on that it helps when people get affirmation, and he'll be smiling and nodding and giving you encouragement. And that's very helpful. I look for Kirk, right? I'm like, right there, dude. That's where you're sitting, so that I know. And I'm going to look at you the whole time. And not quite true, but so those are the things that I look for. I don't look for the professional speaker and say I'm going to emulate that person that flies around the country and does the same speech over and over and over and over again. And people do, and that's good. It's just not what works for me. I don't speak enough to do that. I know somebody who works within our organization, and she is a fantastic speaker, fantastic. And I watch her, and I somewhat lose the content because she's so good at public speaking that I start to focus on how good she is at this. I think she's practicing. I really do. I tell her that all the time. I think you're practicing for a future career in public speaking because she's that good. But that's not what I'm aspiring to, so I choose to pick my peers that do really great things and emulate that. The next is how I get ready. And honestly, this is the scary part, because this is when it becomes very real. And before I actually go to the event, or I shouldn't say that, before I get on stage at the event and present, I actually find out where I'm presenting and I go and I check it out. I did that this morning. Now, I've presented in here many times, but it helps me to start to look at it. Threw me a little bit when I came in and there were only a few people, because I had visualized something different. I had to step out and go and visualize a different size group, because that was different for me. So, but what if you do anything, take away going when you know you're going to speak and find where you're going to speak and go check it out. Because I've had the opportunity to go, and they will set up times when you can go and you can prepare. And it allowed me to go and walk up the stairs and walk down the stairs. You think that's important in heels? It's very important in high heels. And then it allows me to look, and if I know there's going to be lights and I'm not going to see people, I'll look to see where I can see. Versus if it's not going to be lights and it's going to be this, I picture all of you before and know I'm going to see faces. And that type of thing helps me a lot. Recently, this past year, there was 2 times when I was speaking and we had a jumbotron, and one of them was in the round, and it was in Buffalo. It was for President's Club, and there were 1,500 people maybe, and I only had to say like 3 lines, I was halfway in, and there was alcohol. That's all I can tell you at this. So 1,500 people, half of whom probably had a few, but I knew I only had a few lines. And there's a Jumbotron in the round, so it was huge. This was huge. But what I noticed, too, was it wasn't a good quality Jumbotron. So people weren't looking so good up there. So I was pretty happy to be up there, say my first few things, name my people who won, and get off as fast as I could. So I got to prep a little bit of what angles and don't stand that way. You don't always have that ability to do that, but it did help in this case. The other one was at the Long Beach Convention Center, smaller group, but another big Jumbotron, and I had the ability to go and check that out. By the way, people look better on that, I noticed, than the one in Buffalo. And I had the opportunity to go do that. So that's probably been one of my biggest things, is being able to do that and really start to visualize the environment. But this is reality for me, because what it usually starts with is after I've done all of those things, the night before I start prepping. Well, that's not true, I start beforehand, but I start writing what I want to be able to talk about, and I write it down. And then that starts the night before, at least, if not before, but at minimum I engage in that the night before, and then I go to bed. Because number one, I'm not going to sleep well anyways, knowing that I'm probably getting up and talking in front of a large group. So I may as well go and do that the night before, because what happens typically when you go to bed having just done something? You subconscious, and you dream about it. And that actually helps me, because somehow I do well when I'm in bed thinking about it. So I go through and it helps me remember what I'm going to talk about. And then I get up literally, usually at 4:30 in the morning, and I go through and I do it again. I go through my whole thing. If I'm not done writing it out, I'll finish and I go over it and over it again. But I pretty much look like that at 4:30 in the morning. I get my cup of coffee and then I get ready to go. And then this did not come out super bright. But you can see, those are my actual slides with my notes on it. You can see I have slides here with my notes on it, because I take a lot of notes and that's how I personally mentally prepare. Some people can go with no preparation and just speak to the slides. Maybe that's a little harder for me because I have such a diverse group, I don't know, but I need to write things down. And I don't write just the word. I write the full sentence. It's going the full sentence. And then I just reread it and reread it. And the only reason is it helps me remember key words and key points that I know if I wanted to get 3 things across on that slide, I know what those 3 are. And that helps me a great deal. But it's a lot of writing and review. But that's what I do that works for me. And then when it's over, I hope this isn't the audience typically. It's not really what I hope to see. And I hope it's this more so. But at the end of the day, you don't know. You hope you've hit the mark, and you hope you've left something with your audience. But I think if you put enough into it up front and a little bit of practice, then it'll come back to you. But the whole thing is just target something for 1 or 2 things. I've said that a number of times. I don't think you can hope to have your audience take more away than 1 or 2 things, but if each person takes away 1 or 2 things, sometimes different, you should be pretty good. So that's really all I had. I tried that. Did you see that? I tried that. That was my attempt at,
Flying?
Huh?
Flying?
Flying. And
It was so fast.
it didn't work so well. Yeah.
I have a quick question. Have you ever, in practicing the whole sentence, gotten up on stage and it flows in the car, it flows in the morning, you get up there and all of a sudden you forget one sentence and you feel stuck, and you're like, okay, I need to remember that sentence before I can go on, or do you just naturally skip to the next part if that happens?
Yeah, you know what I do? So I do this too, by the way. Did you notice I had this with me? I do this and I never use it. It's clearly a security blanket for me.
Okay.
I never use it, and some people might say, hey, that's not really very good. You should learn how to do that without that. Well, I kind of go, hey, if content's there, I don't know that matters as much. So I use this, and then if you look, I have 1 word written under each, and the 1 word is all I need to remember the sentence. So sometimes I forget the sentence, and then you have to move on. One time I had new glasses, and that was not good, and they were not bifocals, but progressives. and my prompt was down below. They had prompts, and I couldn't read it, and that threw me. Once it threw me, it threw me. I had a hard time getting in a regular cadence, you know. So that was before I started going up and preparing, you know, and looking around. That threw me quite a bit. Thank you. Any other questions?
When you have an audience that you see not receptive or looks angry or looks that are, what time you're going to end? What do you do? What's your approach? How do you?
I try and mentally tell myself that that's really not the case.
Okay.
And I don't think it is.
Okay.
I think it's literally that they're listening. And some people, you know, some of the audiences are pretty large, and because, again, we have such a diverse organization, I know that not everything can be relevant to every single person. And I have to be okay knowing that what I'm talking about at that moment may not hit that person, but that through the slides, some of the things are relevant because I've made a conscious decision to hit them all at some point. So they may tune out, they may be tuning out because I'm 3 o'clock or 4, I've been there, like 5 o'clock right before drinks, you know, on a jam-packed day, which is not fun. But I just try and go, it's not me, you know, it's them.
Okay, good.
I had a question about the speaking at an executive meeting that you mentioned. So sometimes in those sorts of situations, I'm sure what you've prepared as your speech of what you're going to say often then gets side range,
Yeah.
and you have executives talking amongst each other, but you've got your own agenda because you've got either something to persuade them with or defend it with. How do you handle that sort of situation as a public speaker? You know, keeping everybody on track, getting your message across, but at the same time doing it, you know, in an appropriate way.
So a couple of things. I would put that in a meeting or environment, a setting of what you've said. Some is the prep, of which I'm not going to kid you, I do well enough. I think that it's probably the area that people would say they don't prep enough going into meetings. But when you do, and the results are typically good, it's because you've spent the time anticipating their questions to the best of your ability. And that's not going to be 100%. You can't do that 100%. But you have to be able to respond to them, but also know what's next and important and how to draw it back, right? But you have to be flexible. If you go at it where you're following your script no matter what, they're going to get frustrated. No doubt. They will get frustrated. So you have to be flexible. You have to be ready to throw stuff out that you're not going to bring up. Some people will, I've been in meetings where some people, you've just talked about something and you finished it, like they had the sale, right? Closed, you got the sale. And they'll feel the need because it was next to talk about it. And it's like, dude, you had the sale. Don't bring it back up. So you have to know when to stop and ignore that and just go past it and move on. So it takes practice, but probably the best thing I can tell you is try and anticipate the questions they're going to have, because you know what you want to present and what you want to convey may not be what's of interest to them.
I've seen Sandy at a number of meetings, and now
Now you know what I look like at 4:30
yeah,
in the morning.
Yeah, it's 4:30 in the morning. I guess I'm always been impressed when I started to get into high-level meetings where you were speaking that you could be so succinct. When you were trying to interject a thought into the meeting or trying to make a point, you could take all of this conversation where the meeting's starting to derail as we're going through an SAP attempt or whatever, and make a comment and kind of pull it together. So how do you prepare yourself, or what do you think allows you to do that? Is it the preparation? Because in a presentation you have to be succinct, but I think it's a skill you've learned, and I could, however you prepare for that would help all of us, I think.
I'm going to be boring and redundant here. So much of it is knowing your audience and what they want to get, what they have to get out of it. Whether it be a work team that you're trying to give instruction to, if you know what needs to be done, then you just need to get them refocused on what needs to be done, and focus on that particular component. Or if it's in a presentation manner and people are going off, if you know your audience and you know what you're trying to achieve, you just have to pull those things back together. Know what you're trying to achieve and know your audience. Those are the two biggest things. And it does take practice, no doubt.
If you're going to unfamiliar territory, would you ask around like Paul Bay and say, hey, I've never met this guy, could you tell me some of his background and what's important to him?
Yeah, I get that mostly with customer meetings and such more than here now.
Okay.
Albeit we have a lot of new executives,
Yeah.
right? So that's a good point. I will do that though. I'll go and say, what's his background? What's he like? Years ago we had a customer. It was actually Paul and I when it was one of his customers, and we had a customer who threw us completely because we presented this awesome solution and we failed. And he said, I'm so disappointed. And you're like, oh my gosh, right? So it was during an RFP, and as these guys know, many times RFPs can be very iterative. And we went back a second time and went through our presentation, and he said, I'm so disappointed. And we went, aha, negotiation tactic on his part, right? So you learn, we learned then from him, from being with him a little bit more about him, so that when he said, I'm so disappointed, it didn't mean run back and change your whole, offering, because he's using it as a negotiation tactic, So it's learning a little bit more about your audience through asking people and then experience. Paul Reed, who's our new president COO, I met with him and talked about something recently where we had been working on for a couple years. I was pretty proud of that. We've been working on this for a couple years. It's coming to fruition. He made a comment about, I hope it doesn't take a couple years next time. Note to self, not going to do that next time, right? I know a lot of lessons in that. He wants to move faster, and when we've had to work on something for months and months and months and years, not necessarily going to have to share that dirty little detail to him,
Yeah.
But that was experience, He was brand new. He's brand new and was new to all of us at the time. But a little bit of a learning there, He did it though, by the way, so he still was on board, so that was good. One note on that slide, by the way, this silly little slide. This slide I changed a bit because the words, I had to change a lot, but I wanted to use the graphic. And it originally, the concepts, my takeaways flew in and then flew out. Faded in, faded out, and the new ones that appeared, right? It's awesome. It's the first time I found animation. And so I'm like, this is fantastic. So I spent 90 minutes on the slide. One slide, it was before I was using our person internally to do it. And then when it was all done, the feedback I got was, they went too fast. Can you stop those and just put them on a slide? And I'm like, are you kidding me? So I would tell you, animation isn't all the worthwhile. It's really about the content, not the animation. It's a balance. Everything's a balance, right? Any other questions?
Do you have any examples of when a presentation didn't go as planned and you had to rejuggle something in the middle of it from an audience perspective or technology, or Greg Spherical talked about falling off the back of the stage or something like that, and which you had to recover quickly?
I would say the one that was, I think I did recover, but I don't think it showed very well. I felt I recovered. Was definitely with my glasses when I couldn't see. There was a bit of a recovery there, but it was too far gone. No, but as you guys know, my staff can be my guinea pigs very frequently because I'll call them in and say, okay, I have my kickoff meeting, and so I'm going to use you. I shouldn't say guinea pigs. I present it to them first and say, I'm going to show this to you, and I've typically not run through it. Typically, I've drafted it. I haven't spent enough time on it. It's the Friday before, and so I'm going to give it to them. And it's clear, you've experienced it, bumpy and a lot of ums and ahs because I haven't thought about what I'm going to say yet, so it was premature. But I would tell you, even that helped me because I knew where I was going to get stuck. This morning, before coming in, I was at home and I said, do you want to see this deck? And so I was showing and just kind of saying, here's what I'm going to talk about. And I saw where I'm stumbling. And then when I came back and really started to put pencil to paper and get ready, I focused on those areas. Transitions are the big ones for me that are hard. I can tell you about a slide, but then transitioning to the next can be hard. It's why I had my curtain calls candidly. It worked for me. You know, I can't do that when I present in for kickoffs and such. I have to have my transitions down better. Those are my dirty little secrets. The other little tip, and it's just little, is pretend you're talking. For me, I shouldn't say do this, but it works for me. I will pretend I'm talking to people across my desk because sometimes an audience can be intimidating. But I know if I'm having that conversation with someone, it's two people or one person just sitting across from me, I'm going to have no problem carrying that conversation. So I try and do that versus the pretend they're in their underwear. That would be very distracting. So I prefer to just pretend they're one-on-one. Yeah. They're human, I'm human. We're all Yeah, exactly. All right, well, I kept you guys way too long, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll let you guys end and all.
Sandy, before you run off.
We have some.
Oh, geez.
Oh, that's right.
Something for you.
Thank you.
It's one of the rules of Toastmasters, don't leave the podium
Don't leave the
unattended.
podium unattended.
You just
You'll
know
get that.
Well, we should have
I
told her
know.
before
I
you
know.
held her
I know.
accountable for it.
I didn't really walk away, if you know.
No,
what I
she's
mean.
only just
Right, she's here.
strolling
Camera
over.
started. What did you say?
I said, good job.
Thank you. Thank
And
you.
we didn't count that many ums or uhs, so you did really well.
Great. Good. I'm sure I did something else, but this morning they did ask me, so then they're going to give you feedback? I said, heck no. No, Karen, you can keep it here.
What if you staff here?
Again, thank you very much, Sandy, for your excellent presentation. I took some notes because I know exactly. I'm going to probably have to do a presentation eventually, once in my life, with slides. That's one thing that scares me the most, is slides.
Yeah.
I'll just have somebody like these people, wonderful people, do it. There you go. Are we going to have a testimony as well, or is that scrapped?
I think we're not going to have time to do that.
Okay, well, on that note, again, thank you very much for coming out, joining us, seeing what we're all about. Every Thursday, noon, the Mira Loma Room. Please don't mark that down. Come and visit us. We're warm, we're caring, we won't pick you apart too much. And you can visit as many times you want before we look at you and say, sign up already.
And we're a lot of fun.
And we're a lot of fun. We're a lot of fun. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you.